just need to reassemble.
It hasn't, has it?
Well, it hasn't happened yet, Matt, but hopefully it will soon enough. Anyways, welcome back, true believers and all you merry Marvelites, to another really interesting Avengers project related video. So as you all know, we are still awaiting more footage and news relating to the very much anticipated Avengers project, which is indeed being co-developed by Crystal Dynamics and Eidos Montreal, and is officially being published by Square Enix. And even though the Avengers project hasn't even shown off new footage yet, it is still very important to know that indeed Marvel Games and Square Enix have been confirmed to be in a multi-year, multi-game partnership. So alongside of waiting for the launch of the Avengers project to fully come out in whatever year it is fully finished being developed, there are also rumors of Marvel Games and Square Enix also making an open-world, free-roaming space traversal Guardians of the Galaxy game. However, this is indeed just the beginning of the plethora of AAA video games that we are going to be receiving from Marvel and Square Enix in unison. And even though the Avengers and Guardians of the Galaxy are indeed very good launching points to bring out a brand new line of AAA Marvel games similar to that of Spider-Man PS4, I still think it would be fun to speculate as what type of other Marvel games we could receive down the line. But before we actually begin discussing the possible future that lies in store for both Marvel Games and Square Enix, I do have to give a huge shout out to the Marvel reporter at John Shea Harris over on Twitter for actually suggesting that I do a video like this on my channel. So thank you so much, John, for your amazing support, and everyone please go and support him as much as you can. Now, there is one important factor to keep in mind for this list, is that the main publisher relating to all of these games is indeed Square Enix. So unlike Marvel's Spider-Man, the main publisher of that game was indeed Sony Interactive Entertainment, meaning that any game that comes from them will automatically be a PlayStation 4 exclusive. But since this is indeed a multi-year, multi-game partnership between Marvel Games and Square Enix directly, that means that the majority of their games will indeed be multi-platform. Which also means if we are indeed going to be receiving more games from Marvel and Square in the future, the main developers of these projects would have to come from Square directly. So, for example, Crystal Dynamics and Eidos Montreal are directly owned by Square Enix, which is why we are indeed getting the Avengers project from them. But as another example, if you did by chance want to have a AAA standalone Daredevil game developed by Sucker Punch Productions, that wouldn't work since they are indeed owned by Sony Interactive Entertainment and not Square Enix. So even though the developer roster that we can choose from that relies within Square's boundaries is a bit limited, I still think that the games that they have made in the past definitely showcase that they can make some really great titles. And since the first game that Square is deciding to release relating to this new partnership involves one of Marvel's biggest teams, I definitely think that they could do that again with another Marvel team with, of course, the Defenders. Just like the Avengers, the Defenders do focus around a group of Marvel heroes, although this time it is on a much more smaller scale. Instead of focusing on intergalactic threats like aliens or giant robot armies, they mainly focus on more street-level threats that do affect New York City. And even though some of the Defenders members have become Avengers at some point within the Marvel Comics, the main roster that involves this team relates to Daredevil, Luke Cage, Jessica Jones, and Iron Fist. Especially given how much recent popularity they have gained within their own respective Netflix series, I do think a Defenders game could definitely work just like the Avengers project is. This could either be a fully in-depth single-player experience or a more hands-on co-op game where each player could play as a separate defender. So for the multiplayer aspect, it would definitely have a much more Ultimate Alliance-like vibe to it, where you could have each character have unique upgrades while tailoring to them to your own specific playset. Whereas if this was a primarily single-player type game, it would definitely be more linear than open world, as well as specialize on each character's traits from the comics. So for example, Luke Cage could be the biggest brawler of the group, and if you do play as Jessica Jones, that could have a similar gameplay style to Mary Jane within Spider-Man PS4, where you can do some investigative journalism. As for Iron Fist's case, he would be the most graceful of the entirety of the Defenders, while also possibly fighting some of the Hand that are trying to attack Kunlun and New York City. As for our main man Daredevil, his gameplay could actually become a hybrid between that of Jessica Jones and Iron Fist. So in this case, you could play both Matt Murdock and Daredevil, whereas Matt Murdock, you could solve some cases as a lawyer in New York City, and by night, you could actually fight the Hand or other enemies enemies within New York as Daredevil. But seeing that we're already receiving Iron Fist and possibly Luke Cage within Ultimate Alliance 3 later this year, I do think this is the least likely out of all the other possibilities. And even though the Defenders are pretty cool characters, the next pick on the list does revolve around more powers than you could even imagine. And in this case, I am indeed of course talking about the X-Men. Now, even though it is still unclear whether or not the rights that Fox owned for the X-Men effect from the movies involve the games in any way, I still think a really cool game that Marvel and Square could make together is a standalone X-Men game. Now, once again, even though we are seeing some X-Men be involved within Ultimate Alliance 3, I still think that they can indeed pull off their own standalone game. Not only have the X-Men, specifically Wolverine, had their own standalone games in the past, but I do think with the current technology that we do have at our disposal and what type of game you could make with them, there are a lot of possibilities for what an X-Men game with a AAA budget could be. Now, if you did want to take the safe route, you could make another standalone Logan/Wolverine game similar to that of the movie tie-in game of X-Men Origins Wolverine, which was actually a really good tie-in game. Although, the idea I'm having for an X-Men game is a bit more ambitious. Now, even though X-Men Destiny tried to do something similar like this when that game released, I do think it would be very cool to try and create your own unique mutant. And obviously, it would be cool to play as the original X-Men like Wolverine, Cyclops, Nightcrawler, and etc., but again, that would be kind of similar to the playstyle that's already happening within Ultimate Alliance. So in this case, I do think it would be fun to try and create your own unique mutant, which is indeed attending Xavier School for gifted youngsters. And if you have been keeping up with recent gaming news in general, there is a leaked Harry Potter game which is said to be released sometime in either late 2019 or early 2020. And in this game, along with the leaked footage that has been shown off of it, you can create your own unique wizard which is attending Hogwarts and learn different spells by attending several different classes. And not only do these leaks show that you can fully explore Hogwarts Academy inside and out, but you can also possibly play Quidditch, fight wizards in duels, and do lots more. So with all that in mind, if they were able to do the exact same type of RPG implementations within this possible X-Men game, where you can create your own mutant, attend different classes to get certain powers, and also customize your character however you felt like, and explore the entirety of Xavier School, that would be absolutely insane. And even though that may sound a bit ambitious, I definitely think that Square Enix and Marvel could pull it off. But moving on to a much smaller team of heroes compared to that of the size of the X-Men, they still are very much worth the time to be spent with, and that is of course the Fantastic Four. Now this one is a bit tricky, since we have had some pretty subpar Fantastic Four games in the past, but the team themselves can be utilized in a really great way in terms of gameplay. Once again, we have seen what a team-up type game looks like with the Fantastic Four given their appearance within the Ultimate Alliance game, specifically where all of them were included within Ultimate Alliance 2. So even though another team-up/co-op type game could work with the Fantastic Four as their standalone title, I think they could do something a bit more intricate. And if we were to take a page from the Spider-Man PS4 playbook, I do think a great thing that Marvel and Insomniac did is balancing the life between Peter Parker and Spider-Man. So if this were to be a AAA single-player Fantastic Four game, Reed's gameplay would mainly be similar to that of Spider-Man, where it would not be an open-world game, but you would spend some segments in the lab as Reed doing some science stuff, while also fighting some bad guys, of course being Mr. Fantastic. Not only is it a huge blast to swing around New York City as our friendly neighborhood wall crawler, but you can also spend some downtime as Peter by exploring the Fee Shelter or doing some science stuff at Octavius Industries. And if you know what the Fantastic Four are like, you know that there's no bigger scientist out there in the Marvel Universe than Reed Richards. Whereas for the other three members, they would have their own unique gameplay segments as well, similar to that of the idea I just pitched for the Defenders game. Ben Grimm as the Thing would obviously be the tank of the group, so he would mainly spend his gameplay taking out a bunch of bad guys trying to threaten New York City. And as for the enemy variety that could be in this Fantastic Four game would seemingly be endless. Not only could you go up against Dr. Doom and all of his Doombots, but you could also go up against the Mole Man and his minions, along with the Super Skrull and the Skrull Army, and lots more. As for the remaining two members of the brother and sister of the team with Johnny and Sue Storm, their gameplay would obviously focus around flying in a flaming blaze, taking out enemies, as well as sneaking around in stealth segments as Sue, while also beating up bad guys with her force fields. And even though making a AAA standalone Fantastic Four game wouldn't be on the same level of marketing popularity that Spider-Man has within Spider-Man PS4, I still think the game itself could be made if the challenge were to be accepted. But as we move on to the last two contestants of this list, they do indeed actually revolve around individual heroes rather than that of a superhero team. And to mainly involve one of the most brutal anti-heroes within the Marvel Universe, of course goes to the one and only Frank Castle, aka the Punisher. Now if you guys recall, we actually did end up receiving a standalone Punisher game all the way back in 2004. And even though some people do see it to be a bit rustic compared to the other Marvel games we have, some Marvel fans do see this as a cult classic. And if we were to bring Frank Castle back in full-on next-gen glory with his own standalone AAA game, not only would it have to be rated M, but it would also be a much more brutal version of what the 2004 version already was. And even though Square Enix would be the publisher of this potential Punisher game, I can already see what the perfect developer would be to make this game, and that is of course Avalanche Studios. So if you are aware, Avalanche Studios is indeed a developer that does work with Square Enix from time to time, making awesome games like the most recent Mad Max game, but mainly relating to Square Enix is indeed the Just Cause series. And not only do they have the entirety of crazy gunplay down to a T, but they also master their huge expansive open world games with tons of awesome vehicles to try and drive in. This ranges from cars, trucks, boats, tanks, aircrafts, and lots more. So if Square and Marvel were to come together and make a AAA standalone Punisher game, the only developer that you could choose for this job is indeed Avalanche Studios. And since this is the Punisher we're talking about, I do think it could work either way, making it a more linear game similar to that of the 2004 title, or a more open world expansive game like Avalanche Studios is accustomed to making by now, where you can fully explore New York with tons of different vehicles and weapons to try and take out a bunch of bad guys. But as we draw closer to the end of this list, actually relates to a much less murderous and violent hero compared to that of Frank Castle, and actually a hero we already mentioned. And even though he does work well in a team, I do believe his own standalone title is long overdue, and of course I'm talking about the Man Without Fear, aka Daredevil. Now yes, this is indeed a bit of a cop-out since I already included Daredevil within the Defenders game possibility, but still, even though I do think a Defenders game could work really well, I think a solo Daredevil game could work even better. Not only does Daredevil as a character have some really awesome similarities to that of Spider-Man and Batman, but I do think the man behind the mask is what makes Daredevil such a great character. And once again, to take from Spider-Man PS4's playbook, I think a great feature that could be implemented within a solo Daredevil game is playing as both Matt Murdock and Daredevil separately. So since within Insomniac's universe, Peter is indeed a research assistant working at Octavius Industries, and of course our friendly neighborhood Spider-Man, Matt Murdock is a lawyer and a vigilante by night. And just like the Punisher game possibility, I do think a Daredevil standalone game could work either way as a linear game or a fully open world game. But since the open world aspect may be a bit too similar to that of Spider-Man PS4, which you would have to recreate New York City all over again, I do think a linear game is much more effective. Even more so, if you were indeed to take out the open world aspect for a Daredevil game, that would mean you would spend more time playing as Matt Murdock as a lawyer solving cases and being within linear aspects of the game playing as Daredevil with awesome combat and style. Not only could the developers add some really cool fighting mechanics as well as do something really cool with Daredevil's radar sense, but as Matt Murdock, it would have a really LA Noire vibe where you could solve cases and try and concede if they are indeed telling the truth or lying in court. This would give a lot of depth to Matt Murdock and Daredevil's characters altogether, and I definitely think this would be a game that a lot of Marvel fans would definitely want to see. But until we come anywhere near to these gaming possibilities from Marvel and Square Enix, we do have to see how the Avengers project turns out whenever that game officially releases. And until that time comes, everyone, that's the video that I have for you today, and please let me know all your thoughts in the comment section down below. What did you think of my top 5 gaming possibilities that Marvel Games and Square Enix could make within their multi-year, multi-game partnership, and which one did you like the most? For me, out of all these, I do think a standalone AAA Daredevil game could work the best, especially with all the gameplay mechanics they could input within a character like Daredevil, but I do think we have to see if he is indeed going to be within the Avengers project first and foremost. Also, be sure to let me know your own unique idea for what type of Marvel game you would like to see be made from Square and Marvel in the near future. And as a bonus, we are indeed bringing up the amazing photo mode competition that is still going on within the Spidey Squad community. So yes, this amazing Spider-Man PS4 photo mode competition continues to grow, and all you guys participating are doing an amazing job. And with our 7th week of photo mode done taking pictures of the vintage comic book suit, we did in fact choose 4 winners who did take amazing shots of the suit in action. So huge congrats to @duh_purplegamer, as well as @UOHQ1 and @MomSpidey, and ending it off with @MatthewXG427 for taking these amazing shots of the vintage suit within Spider-Man PS4. And again, if you indeed submit your photo with the hashtag SpideySquadPMComp, you may indeed just have a chance to have your photo be featured in one of these videos. And with the vintage suit out of the way, we are indeed moving on to the 8th week of our photo mode competition, now taking pictures of the homemade suit within Spider-Man PS4 in action. So try and take as many photos as you want of this suit in action and pick the one that you like the most to submit for the competition in general. And until next time everyone, thank you all so much for watching, stay merry Marvelites, peace out.
Am I dead? Why does heaven smell like a wet dog?
Go to hell.